So, The Woman in the Window is finally here on Netflix, and I feel like this has been a somewhat anticipated movie, but also forgotten by the time like trailers came out, and it's been in development hell for like a year, 2 years.
Mm-hmm. It was supposed to come out in 2019, and I think it was that like test audiences said that the twist was hard to understand. So they had to do reshoots. I don't know how extensive the reshoots were.
Was it delays? Was it COVID-based delays? Like you?
After the test screening.
So
delay.
It was like
the test screening delay required reshoots, so they had to get the cast back together, had to reshoot. I don't know how extensive they were, but I know it had to do with the ending and explaining stuff. And then they were like, "All right, cool, we're on track to release it." And then COVID hit, and then they delayed it, and it sort of got the like 2-month delay, 3-month delay, 4-month delay, year-long delay, and then they finally were just like, "It's coming out on Netflix now."
Dang. Yeah, I remember the original trailers coming out and being like, cool, we'll check that out when it comes out. And then it kind of disappeared off the face of the earth forever. And then it just pops right back up on Netflix. So I was immediately like, okay, let's jump into this movie. But before I even watched the movie, I started seeing headlines and reviews and articles about it being somewhat of a letdown. And so I was like, hold up, let me pull my expectations back. Amy Adams, Joe Wright, who has done some phenomenal movies like Atonement, film with
Darkest Hour, Gary Oldman,
which was
he did
Gary
the Pride
Oldman.
and Prejudice with Keira
speaking
Knightley.
of Gary Oldman in Woman in the Window is so good.
Yeah.
How does he just transform for every single role? Like, he's a different person, but then you can see like small hints of him, but they're almost unrecognizable.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't even really pick him out at first, but then when I was watching some of the performances, I was just like, oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
There's only a few people that can really come across the way that he does. But I was really kind of wary going in because the reviews were all of a sudden kind of, people were saying it was boring. They were saying it was just kind of a letdown and so on and so forth. But then we get to the point where I watch the film and I quite honestly, I'm trying to think of how to say it. I think I loved it. Like, I really enjoyed the film.
I didn't see any of the reviews. I didn't know what the reception of the movie was. I just seen the trailer that like when you scroll across it on Netflix and you see the little trailer. And I was like, "Oh, that's a great cast. That looks good. I'm gonna turn it on."
Kind of thing where it's like great cast, great writer and director attached.
Yeah, and I watched it and I was like fully involved, like fully into it the whole time. And then it was over and I was like, I really like that. And then I looked it up and I saw it had like 25% on Rotten Tomatoes. Yeah, I was like, I could understand like some people not liking it or being like a 50% movie or like a 50.
It was not
25%.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense to me because it was not a perfect film by any means. But I mean, that being said, any film helmed by Amy Adams, it's hard to be bad. Like, I'm trying to think. Like, I can't think of a time I did not enjoy watching Amy Adams on screen since like Enchanted.
Yeah, she really is like just one of the best.
She also
actors.
Consistently, I kind of trust her. There's some actors where you kind of trust them to attach themselves to greatness.
Yeah.
Like, she consistently does strong dramatic films, even if they're not perfect.
Yeah.
And she consistently gives it her all in them. And I thought she did here.
And
I really enjoyed her performance.
The whole cast is great. I mean, Gary Oldman's great. Brian Tyree Henry is his name, is really good in a small role. And Julianne Moore's in the movie for a little bit, and she's very good in it.
Yeah, I was, when I sat down to watch the movie, people were saying it was kind of boring. And one of the first things that I noticed right off the bat was that I was gripped throughout the whole film.
Yeah.
I think that when it comes to, no spoilers here yet, but there's a bit of an ending twist, and some of the elements of the way that the ending comes together, I think were not perfect. You could also critique them in some ways. I didn't think they were bad.
Well, the movie, I found the mystery of the movie like constantly pulling me through. Like, I wanted to know what happened and everything, but it is sort of the issue where the question's a lot more interesting than the answer. Like, I did find that once the reveal came, I was like, I liked it better when it wasn't.
I agree. But that being said, the ride was so enjoyable to me, which is where I don't get the boring critique, was that throughout the film, I wanted to know what happened, but I was also just so ensconced in the feel of the film, the suspense. And, the film was actually, and book really, were inspired by Alfred Hitchcock films.
Yeah, one of the common critiques that I've seen is that it's a ripoff of Rear Window, which is a movie where a guy is confined to his house and starts watching his neighbors and thinks he witnesses a murder and spends the whole movie trying to convince people that he's not crazy.
But would that not be a critique of the book?
Yeah.
begin with. So it's kind of like,
Yeah,
'cause
sort of.
This was a film that's based on a
now
book.
the movie does visually lift a lot from
Yeah.
Rear Window. I mean, one of the first, it's not hiding it. One of the first shots in the movie shows Rear Window playing on the TV. Like, it's
Yeah.
very blatant about it.
I guess I kind of liked it, and maybe that's like a partial partial to Alfred Hitchcock films.
It's not just Rear Window. There's echoes of Vertigo, where like overcoming a fear involves running up a staircase, and you know, there's a lot. There's some visual elements that are lifted from all of his movies.
It's hard when you enjoy that, because
but
I saw that
I thought they did it well,
I love this,
and also it wasn't like they were hiding it. I mean, they were pretty blatantly.
It didn't really feel like it didn't feel like a cheap ripoff. It felt like a strong homage.
Well, Hitchcock had a very strong visual language. Like, his movies are instantly recognizable just through the way that he told stories and the way that he represented things visually. And I feel like when you take that visual language and you use it effectively, even when it's an homage or a ripoff or whatever you want to call it, if you're using it effectively, then it's working. And I thought the movie used it pretty effectively.
Yeah, I mean, and just from a sheer entertainment level, I was constantly wondering what was going on. I was constantly a little bit tense, not scared, but just kind of tense. The way that every time they would introduce a lot of characters, they were almost jump scares. There were slight jump scares, especially for her tenant who lived below her.
Yeah.
The way that they laid the breadcrumbs. I mean, but the time at which this is not really a spoiler, and I'm not going to say it fully, but like where they kind of reveal that she's getting duped for the murder that she thinks she witnesses was very unsettling. It was like, no one believes her. They think she's crazy. It was the type of film that was just kind of gripping, because you were like, I thought they did a really good job putting you in her shoes. Speaking of which, they don't show any type of like overhead or broad views in the film until the very end, which this is, an agoraphobic woman who only stays inside her house, and they did a really great job, I thought, of making it feel like you are just living in this house.
Well, I thought I
wasn't sure what time of day it was.
They did a great job of making you feel like you were seeing things through her eyes. Like, everything felt a little off, especially for the first 30 minutes. Like when Julianne Moore shows up and she's supposedly the neighbor, and that's going to be the central question of the movie: is was she really the neighbor, or was she even real? I like the way that they had Julianne Moore play it, because I was a bit like, is she real?
Yeah,
because she seems a bit off, and everything's a little bit weird. Yeah, or the son is especially
the original encounter
very
with the son
off.
was like that, and even some of her interactions with the tenant,
she
would always get jump scared by him.
Yeah,
and it was like, I was like, at some point in this movie, it's not gonna be right.
I love that part of it, because it's like everything felt just slightly off, and it felt like you were living in the mind of somebody who was sort of slightly scared of everything. And I thought that was really effective at making you question what is real and what's going on. And, you even start questioning, like, is there a psychiatrist real? Is it like, are these things?
And that's my main praise for the movie, was immersion.
Yeah.
Like, you can have some critiques for it. Some of them are valid. When it comes to the ending, I don't really want to get into spoilers or critiquing the ending, because we could be here all day. But it's like you said, it's one of those things where the question was more interesting than the answer, but I thought the question was more enjoyable enough to not make the answer unsatisfying.
Yeah. Well, also it's, I'm not going to say it's a type of movie that we don't get anymore, 'cause you do get sometimes, but it's in a style that you don't get a whole lot.
Yeah.
It's sort of it's a big sort of A-list cast playing over the top characters in a story that is taken seriously, but it's very much a story. It is not meant to be entirely realistic. It is very much a genre piece. Mm-hmm. And I feel like for being a sort of pulpy genre thriller, it was very effective at being a thriller. It was very
effective at what it set out to do. It felt
and they got A-list cast to play sort of these jobs. Genre roles.
Yeah. Which kind of brings me to talking about the people involved in the film at all. I mean,
Kurt Russell's son was the tenant, Wyatt Russell, and he was really good in it too.
Yeah, across the board, everyone was believable. Everyone was believable, even down to Anthony Mackie playing the husband. I enjoyed that performance as well. I mean, just when it comes to seeing the bad reviews or, I guess the complaints about the film or just kind of low reception, I was just kind of saddened, because I was like, really? I don't agree. I'll just say it right now. I don't agree. I don't really understand it. Not a 10 out of 10 film, but very enjoyable. Yeah. Like a 7 or 8 for me.
Yeah. I mean, if people find it boring, there's not much it's hard to tell somebody that's not boring. If they weren't interested, they weren't interested. But for me, I was totally into it. I sort of liked I liked some of the way that it chose to represent things. Like, so moving a little bit into spoiler territory, I really liked the bit where, like, one of my favorite scenes in the movie was where they revealed that her family was dead the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
And I just loved the way that they showed that visually. In a shot that was kind of ripped from a Hitchcock movie. They had her, she's like trying to convince them that she's not crazy, and she's sounding crazier and crazier and crazier.
Yeah.
And then she's like, your family, the cop's like, your family's dead. And it sort of like zooms in on her face and the setting changes.
Yeah.
And it just like turns like ice blue. And then you see like, how she was in a car wreck, and it looks like she tried to keep her family alive through like a snowstorm after the wreck. And then it shows, we go back to the scene where they're in the house, and she's trying to explain to the cops what's going on. And then you see her like car is like crashed into the side of the house. And like, I love the visual representation of that.
The visual representation of the car crash in the house was something I really enjoyed. Because it was beautiful.
Yeah,
like, just the colors and the contrasting, the reds and the blues. But also just it's some slightly unconventional manner of showing it in a artistic way, despite whatever types of, Hitchcock inspirations there were. I really enjoyed that. And while we're on the spoiler section, I will say, just to lodge one complaint, I didn't love how over-explained the final reveal was. So, like, spoiler alert, when they reveal in the end of the film who the killer actually is, that person kind of gives you a bit of a monologue of like over explaining why they killed and who they killed and what happened, in a way it was like, oh, and by the way, we're going to explain all the questions in the movie. And I don't feel like that ever really falls.
It does seem to have come from the reshoots, certainly, because it was very much like he just popped up and was like, I'm evil, here's why I'm evil, and here's exactly what I did.
Instead of
at the same time, I
showing the killer kind of come up and be like, oh God, and you don't really need a lot of explanation.
Just I kind of understand, because I was thinking about the twist, and I read a little bit about like what the twist was in the book, and it's the same thing, but it's more explained in the book because it's a book. But it is a bit of a hard twist to explain through her perspective. If you're only seeing things through her perspective, and you don't want to pull like a monk style, like black and white, show everything type thing, then it is a little bit hard to explain the details. Like, my main questions were like, I don't really get the father and his motivation. I don't really get like how they played. I didn't care that much, but if you want to know, if you're the type of person who's going to watch a movie and want all the answers and want to know what's going on fully, then you might have a hard time with the end. Yeah. Because it's both over-explained and still not that clear.
What got me was, especially when you say reshoots, it makes perfect sense, was, and this kind of goes into the people involved in the film, about a third of the way through the film, I was on my phone Googling who wrote this film, because I was immediately impressed by the level of craft that they showed with the way that they worked the dialogue. The dialogue was really clean. Everything stood out well, and there was lots of great information and exposition that was laid like beautiful breadcrumbs through the script in a way that was very impressive to me. The way that everything was falling out, specifically through the dialogue, was something I really liked. Now, jump to the end. It changed tones completely when the end reveal happens, because you get a like minute and a half monologue, which, while being well performed by the actor, was not feeling like it was in character with the rest of the film, because the rest of the film was so tactful with the way that it laid out the information that the fact that it got reshot to be more clear makes perfect sense, because I could definitely see studio executives saying, we need it to be like this, versus the writer himself doing that, which kind of brings me to the writer himself. This writer is a playwright, correct? Tracy Letts, right?
He wrote Killer Joe and August Osage County, which were both plays, and he adapted into movies.
And this is his first film that that's not been his own work, correct? Because he was writing plays, and this is him adapting a book, which was only released in 2018?
17 or 18.
2017 or 18.
Pretty
so
quick.
Pretty quick adaptation. But I thought overall he did a really great job of adapting that. So the contrast of the end really did jar me a bit. And I think that's where my main criticism lies.
Yeah. But, I mean, the end does go like pretty over the top with like the final like sort of action bit.
The action bit and the violence. So that was actually where it redeemed itself from the monologue, because it became intense and really enjoyable to watch.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I thought the scene was very entertaining. It did feel like a jarring tone shift to me, and I I don't know. I loved, to me, the like emotional climax of the movie was revealing that her family was dead.
Yeah.
Like that was like the emotional climax of it, and then the rest was like just the explanation of what was going on. But yeah, I mean, I definitely, my complaints are all pretty much about the ending. But I've thought the ride up until the ending was so enjoyable that I didn't mind it.
Yeah, and that's really where it comes down to in the end, where it's like the ending could take some points off for some people, but I did not think it hurt the overall film and the way I perceived it to the point of dislike in any way.
Yeah.
It was more just like, hey, it could have been a little bit better, like all films. You know, you could always change things, but that's not really how it works, especially in the world of Hollywood. So yeah, but thank you guys for watching this episode of the Cortright Cast, where we talk everything film across the board every single week. Check back for more uploads later this week, talking about all sorts of films, all sorts of things. Thank you guys for watching. Drop a comment below with your opinion and like the video.